So your wife's been Googling like crazy, sending you all the fertility articles, and casually suggesting that you cut back on beer, late nights, and that third cup of coffee. Sound familiar? Before you roll your eyes, hang on. Dr. Marc Sklar, the fertility expert, is here to break it all down. Why does sperm take months to improve? When should you get a semen analysis test? And most importantly, is your wife actually right about all of this? If you're tired of hearing, babe, you should really try this, but you also really want this baby, this episode is for you. Feeling like this whole baby making journey is never going to work out? You've done it all, diet changes, supplements, tracking your cycle, and yet the pregnancy test is negative. It's so frustrating, and you're asking yourself, why isn't this happening for us? I'm Susan Gladstein, a holistic fertility coach and mom to 7, including 2 miracle babies after a vasectomy reversal, and I get it. Being told everything looks fine by doctors while still feeling stuck can leave you feeling hopeless and confused. On this podcast, I'll share practical, natural ways to support your fertility without all the overwhelm. Forget the everything's normal talk and the rush into fertility treatments. I'm here to show you a better way. If you're ready to take practical steps that fit with God's plan for your family, you're in the right place. I truly believe that you can have the baby you've been praying for. I am super pumped because I have Dr. Marc, aka the fertility expert, with me. I've been following him on Instagram as I've sort of dived into this fertility world, and obviously hearing it from a male perspective hits a little bit different, but I have loved everything that he has going on. If you haven't checked out his fertility TV, totally got to do that. But thank you so much for joining me and being here today and sharing all of your wisdom. But I'm curious if you could just share a little bit, like, how did you get into being the fertility expert?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, thanks for having me. I love talking about fertility, and I think today's conversation, just the topic and kind of where it's headed and directed, I think is something that's really needed. So I appreciate, being able to chat with you about it. Um, you know, the being known as the fertility expert came much later. But I got into fertility, about 25 years ago or more. I was always interested in women's health. But there was a moment when I was working on my first fertility patient. I kind of had this uh, interest in it from the outside, like, oh, this is interesting. Women's health is interesting. I'm not sure if it's for me. And then I worked on my first patient, I worked with my first patient who had PCOS. And within 4 months, I share the story so many times, but like within 4 months, she was pregnant. She didn't know. She thought she was missing her cycle again. And when she came in, she goes, I know we've done all this work, but I'm really, I don't know why, but I've lost my period again. And I said, well, before we, get all negative about this, why don't you go over to the restroom? Here's a test. Why don't you test and come out and let's see what it says. She comes out with a big smile because she's pregnant. And she couldn't believe it. And that when she came out with this big smile, the feeling that I had, even now, just talking about it, I start to get the chills. But that feeling, like it's difficult to reproduce until you get the next email, the next letter, the next DM, the person who walks in the office, the next conversation where I'm talking to someone who says I'm pregnant, and they're super excited again. That's the only time I've been able to reproduce it. And that feeling, I knew I wanted to reproduce, and I wanted to do it over and over, and not just for me, but for them, right? Because I could see the impact it had for her. So that kind of solidified it for me. I was going to dive deep into fertility and reproductive health. And then about 8 years into practice, where I was tired of creating the same, or not the same videos. I was tired of saying the same things to all my patients. And I was like, I could just record a video and have them watch it. And one of the staff in my office said, well, but let's just put it on YouTube, and we'll just send them the link and they can watch it there. And at that point, like, yes, YouTube was there and people were watching, but not to what it is today and how we consume that information today. Now there's whole shows and broadcasts through YouTube that wasn't there. It wasn't happening. um, so I just put all those videos up for my patients to see, and then and we're like, oh yeah, we'll just let's just brand it as fertility TV for our patients. But I started getting contacted from couples and women all over the world asking me questions and can they work with me. And that's when the Fertility Expert was created, because I knew that I needed to create something that was a more structured resource for couples all over the world. And I wanted to also be able to help couples all over the world. And so I created my Hope coaching program after that, to be able to support those couples. So that's really how I pulled all of this together. And I have to tell you, I love making videos and creating that content. This morning, I was going through, the next 5 videos that I'm going to be recording, working out what I want to say. Tomorrow, I'll be filming for a few hours, and it's just like, I love it. I'm like, it's just putting out this content for everybody. And just this week, I got someone who messaged me saying, because of the changes you've made, my husband's semen parameters have dramatically improved, and I just want to say thank you. And that makes all the effort, everything that I'm doing, so worthwhile. But I love also those moments where I'm directly interacting with the members of my coaching program. It's fun wherever they are to kind of help them figure out what's going on. How are they going to get the resources that they need? How are they going to get the results that they deserve? So it's really just become all of me at this moment, and I love doing it.
That's like you are like speaking to my heart, because I kind of feel the same thing. A few years ago, I was like, trying to figure out who I was and what I wanted to do in life. And I was just having all of these aspirations of being what I call the kid lady. It's kind of like the cat lady, but with kids. And I just wanted to love on all of these kids everywhere. And what better way to be able to do that from afar, like to be able to love and help all of these people have babies. And of course, my husband and I were married for 9 years before we decided to have a reversal. So I had my miracle baby at 40 in the middle of COVID, which drastically changed my life. But now that I look at her, I also have an 18 and 22-year-old. So like we literally started all over. Um, every time I look at her, I just think, well, my husband and I look at each other a lot and think, what would we be doing right now if we didn't have her? Like she's very entertaining and the center of our world, whereas like all of our older kids are all out of the house, all 4 5 of the older kids. And so to be able to help people who were like us, where we desperately wanted this to happen, didn't know where to go. I didn't really have resources. A lot of the things that I got from doctors were just like, well, it all looks great. Everything's normal. You just need to, go into these other alternatives. And so I'm very passionate about getting to sort of the root causes of things versus just skipping the part where you get that connection with your spouse. And kind of how I feel like certainly there's a time and place for IUI and IVF, but I think a lot of times we get like fast forwarded into that without really identifying things like, well, how much sleep are you getting? How much exercise are you doing? All of these basic things that I know that if you go follow him on Instagram, you'll see lots of really great foundational things. But one of the things that is very highly sought after in my community is sperm testing. Everybody wants to know, did the reversal work? What are the numbers like? And a lot of times there's some expectations there that, oh, we did it. It should all be great. And then when it doesn't happen as fast, there's a lot of discouragement. So I know that you have some thoughts on proactive sperm testing and some strategies for improving quality. So I was wondering if you could share a little bit about that for an audience that's very, very interested in knowing, how do I make this happen?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm very proactive about men testing their sperm because in the world I live in, they don't do it often enough, or they don't do it at all. So, in vasectomy reversal, I think it's slightly different where they want to test and potentially they want to test all the time to see where the numbers are at. I think for me, it's really important that we have some reality and understanding of what's possible to change in what time frame and when does it realistically make sense to test. So I don't believe that most men are going to see a change in their parameters until as soon as 3 months. If it happens sooner, that's the exception to the rule. It's really not the norm. And I often say it could take even 6 months. So I like to say 3 to 6 months. I do not like to recommend testing before 3 months. It's not that you couldn't do it, but I find that it's actually going to cause more stress in general when we know that we really shouldn't be seeing change for about 3 months. There's a lot of healing that needs to happen. After that healing process happens, body's got to do what it needs to do. That takes time. So at the soonest, it's really 3 months that you're going to notice positive change. And even then, it's probably not the full progress that you're going to see. It's just going to be slight. So that's more of like a benchmark to see where we're at. I have had some urologists say, yeah, you should be fine in about 2 to 3 months, which I think is just crazy. I don't know what world they're living in. I actually think those are the urologists that don't really deal with male fertility very much. And so they don't really live in that world and understand what it takes. I think you're going to cause yourself quite a bit of stress if you're testing a month later, 6 weeks, 8 weeks later, because if it doesn't change, then you're going to start to worry that it didn't work. The stress that you've just caused to yourself is actually worse for you, and contributes to the problem. And so for that, like, just take 3 months off. Like, just say, okay, we're just going to take it easy, enjoy life, enjoy each other. In 3 months at the earliest, maybe 4 months, I'll test the first time. I'll see where I'm at, see what the results show. And then from there, I can decide, when we do the next one and move forward. So I really don't recommend testing before 3 months and even a little bit later than that.
And I know that, I mean, in the vasectomy reversal world, I mean, it's one of those things where it's like you want to know if the thousands of dollars that you've just spent has been effective. So in that sense, I think the incidence of people actually testing and adhering to that is pretty high, but there's still that, you know, maybe fear. I don't know if that's the right word, but reluctance. A lot of times it's like, well, I don't want to go to the clinic. It's embarrassing. You know, it's stressful.
Right.
And I personally have recommended some at-home tests that give good data, like Fellow. But what would you say to somebody who's kind of just maybe they don't want to know the results, or um, there's whatever emotions that are attached to having to go into a clinic? Like, what would you say to somebody that's kind of struggling with that?
Yeah, I think we have to know like what the progress is. So we have to test at some point. Um, I think obviously I understand the kind of fear around it, and just not knowing we spent this money and this effort and the trauma on it and potentially don't see the change. But we won't know until we test. And for me, knowledge is power. So I want to know what that information is so that I know how to support somebody, right? If I don't have that information, it's very difficult to create a plan and guide and support couples to get the necessary support they need and make the necessary changes to see those results. So I also don't pretend to think that the vasectomy reversal is going to do everything. So I know that it's not like if it was just about the reversal, the rates and the numbers would be much higher. So it's not so much, it's not just about that. And we can kind of circle back to that in just a moment. But to your other question, like, look, it's uncomfortable to give a sample wherever you are. You know, men are used to aiming, right? Now you got to aim into a cup. And it's weird. And now you're doing it in some office, maybe, you know, depending on the office, they might not even have a room for it. It might be the bathroom. Like it's just not comfortable. Um, and it's really it's super awkward. So I'm a big fan of collecting at home, and I'm a big fan of using the at-home testing kits as long as we have good, you know, solid companies that can do that for you. And when you do it at home, it's way more comfortable. Maybe your partner can help you as well to some degree, like no exchange of bodily fluids can be done. I say that on purpose because it's been done. And I have plenty of stories, unfortunately, that I could share. But, you know, the reality is at home, it's much easier. It's way more comfortable. And as long as you've got a company that you trust and you're comfortable with, and there's really only two that I'm a fan of that I recommend. You're not buying it on Amazon. You're not buying it at CVS. Those tests don't tell us much. They're not worth the money. So you're not doing those things. But the two companies you mentioned, one is Fellow, the other one is Legacy. And those are really the only two companies that I think are worth spending your money on for testing. They give you really, they're looking at the right parameters. They're testing in a real lab. You're not doing it at home. And so I think that that makes a lot of sense. People often question like, oh, but you know, if I do it at the clinic, they say I've got to be there in a certain time frame and it has to be collected in, you know, within an hour and so forth. Yes, if you're doing it there, these companies wouldn't be testing and getting the results that they are getting if it didn't work. You know, there's a process to how they do it. Everything's overnighted. So I don't recommend collecting on a Friday, Saturday, you know, to ship out on a Monday. Like that's not going to work. Okay, for everybody. But you know, you ship out on Monday, you collect on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you ship immediately, you're good. So I do think that's fine, and I really think it's much better for everybody. I see the place that I actually see the biggest change in parameters when someone does it at home is volume because they're much more comfortable. Whereas I typically see much lower volume when someone's at the lab. They're like, okay, I'm done. Here you go. Um, so that's something that I definitely see a big change in. And it's easy to see progress from there as well. And some of those companies, because if you're returning, they'll give you discounts in addition to that. So
That's all very, yes, volume is something that I also notice a difference in. Awesome. So let's say because it's always such a focus for people when they go and they get their analysis done and maybe the quality is not what they thought it was because they had some expectation that like, oh, I'll just do this reversal and everything's going to be great. And I was a fertile turtle at one time, it's going to happen again. And then when it's not, I think, I mean, I know for us, it is a stressful, it adds stress, which is obviously not going to improve
yeah.
your numbers whatsoever. But what are some things that, generally speaking, that you recommend as far as sperm quality, sperm health that men should be doing to help improve the numbers even before they go in for the reversal?
Yeah, I think the first thing that all men listening need to recognize or remember and remind themselves about is that sperm are sensitive, they're volatile, and they change both positively and negatively relatively quickly. So the things that so I say this because when someone says to me, "Oh yeah, I fathered children before, but now we're having trouble," that's wonderful that it worked before. It doesn't mean that you don't get tested now because you've had children. I literally just had this conversation an hour ago with somebody. Um, just because you fathered a child before doesn't mean that the sperm are the same. Odds are they're not. And so we want to hold ourselves accountable. And so the reason I frame it in that way is because with whatever interventions we need to do to improve our sperm parameters, vasectomy reversal being one of them, there is so much more in addition to that that is going to be very, very supportive. So when you're having any sort of surgery or procedure, there's inflammation, there's trauma to the area. So we want to support that, right? We want to decrease the inflammation, we want to reduce the trauma, we want to get through that as quickly as possible. So anything that you could start to do in the immediate short term to support that process is great, like icing, right? But I also think that's not like we think of that like, oh, until the scar heals and then, I'm fine. I don't have to ice. Like actually icing for the testicles is really valuable. And we have seen that can on its own improve sperm parameters. So that should be a regular thing that men do who are trying to, improve their chances after a reversal. I would be doing that for 6 months, 12 months, whatever that is, right? It doesn't have to be for long. I know if you've not done it before, you might be saying to yourself, well, that just doesn't sound comfortable. I'm telling you, every man says, oh, this feels pretty good. Yeah, I could do this. This is easy. And you're just sitting at your desk working, and an ice pack goes down below, and you're fine. So I do think that is something that's super valuable in the short term for healing. Um, if we're talking about inflammation and healing from that sort of procedure, then you could also add in some supplements for that, like some turmeric and some fish oils. Those would be helpful in those short-term timeframes as well. But it also has to be about us taking responsibility as an individual for our health. So it's not always about, oh, I'll just have this procedure or I'll take that pill. Yes, I can tell you a slew of supplements you can take, but like it shouldn't always be about that. When I mentioned previously that sperm are sensitive and volatile, I say that because the things that you do in your life on a regular basis, the things you consume, the things you come in contact with, your lifestyle directly impacts your sperm health, period. So if you are eating crappy and eating McDonald's every day as your breakfast and lunch, and you're not exercising, you're stationary, you're not creating good habits for yourself. And those are going to show up at some point in your sperm parameters. So when I talk about it's much more than just having the reversal, it's about creating a proper healthy lifestyle for yourself. I want everyone to think about this overall. You are creating a life. To create that life, you are giving part of yourself to that individual, and your partner is doing the same. I know everybody listening wants the healthiest, most amazing version of themselves in those children that you want to create. Your health, your partner's health is what is going to create that. So if you don't sleep, you drink alcohol, you don't exercise, you eat McDonald's every day, you're overweight, whatever negative things you want to say about health, when you conceive, that is the child that you are creating. You are passing on all of that to them. I will also say, to broaden this, you're not just passing that on to them, you're potentially passing that on to their children, to your grandchildren. And your parents, your grandparents passed on those things to you and to your children. So this is about 7 generations. And this is what our ancestors understood that we have either ignored or forgotten. And so I don't know any parent who doesn't want the best child, the healthiest child. And I know this because as soon as they're born, they're like, oh, now we got to eat organic and we got to go buy all these things that we didn't buy before. And we got to take, like, that shouldn't happen when the baby's born. That should happen well before, because you're working backwards, and it's much harder to change that person because genetically some of their coding is already established. You want to do that in advance. So you're not just doing it for your children. You also want, I'm assuming, to be around to see them live long, healthy lives, to enjoy them to the fullest, to be able to play with them and hang out and play football and basketball and whatever it is you want to do with them. You want to be healthy to enjoy your life with them. And the only way to do that is to live a healthier lifestyle. So we need to take responsibility for that. And those things will create better quality sperm. So this is not just like, oh, I'm just trying to make your life more difficult by making you change habits you don't want to change. I'm trying to make you a healthier person, to become a healthier dad, to create healthier children and healthier grandchildren. I think that's something we should all strive for. And so we should be looking to change the way we eat. I don't have to, I can, but I don't have to sit here and tell you what you should and shouldn't be eating. I mean, maybe I have to massage that a little bit, but like in general, I think most of us know that, oh, okay, I shouldn't be having fast food. I should be not having processed foods. I should be avoiding sugars. I should be avoiding fried foods, minimize my caffeine intake. I should have moderate amounts of alcohol or none. You know, I shouldn't be smoking pot. Like these are things that I think this is all common sense stuff, right? Okay, if I binge Netflix all night long and I only get 3 or 4 hours of sleep and then I got to go to work, doing that every day, probably not a good idea. But the amount of people that do, it's high, right? Like I'm not creating these examples because I'm just out of thin air. These are real examples of conversations that I have, right? So that person that I mentioned who just messaged me this week, so happy about her husband who's made great progress, like he was smoking a ton of marijuana, and he didn't want to. I can't remember all the exchange we had, but like I know he did not want to stop it. But I was like, that's like, you could see the results. Like you just told me what his results were. This is what they are. I'm telling you, even though he doesn't want to do it, like, can I tell you it's going to change everything? I can't. Will it change a lot? I think so. And sure enough, his parameters dramatically changed. You know, so what are you willing to change? What are you willing to give up to have the child that you want? I don't think it's asking a lot to do those things. And typically, if we're doing, smoking pot and drinking alcohol and, on a lot of caffeine, that's telling me your lifestyle is off. It's telling me you don't have proper coping mechanisms for the stress in your life, that you always need something else to help you manage that stress. We need to reevaluate our life to do that. So it's about creating a healthy lifestyle. You're sitting at home every day, get outside and walk. Just walk for 60 minutes every day or 30 minutes every day. I'm a big proponent of exercise. I had gotten away from it because of work and I just wasn't prioritizing it. In June, I reprioritized it. I feel so much better. I can't even begin to explain to people, like, I miss a week of exercise for whatever reason, and I don't feel the same. So these are things that are super, super valuable for just our overall health. They wouldn't be standard things to do if they weren't important, right? Sleeping well, getting enough good quality sleep. Like we all should be getting minimum 7 hours of sleep every night, good quality sleep. But again, we stay up late because, oh, this is my time to relax. So I'm going to turn on Netflix and whatever it is. Yes, but I don't think, watching a thriller at 11 p.m. because we're trying to relax or 10 p.m. is actually relaxing. It's not regulating your nervous system. You know what is regulating your nervous system? Sleep. You know what's healing to your body? Sleep. That's what is. So let's reprioritize the things that are important. I had this conversation with someone yesterday because she was she we were talking about her diet, and she says to me that, yeah, so my diet is she says, oh yeah, I eat whatever eggs for breakfast and I make it this way. I'm like, that sounds great. What time do you have that at? She says, oh, between 10 and 11 a.m. I'm waiting to see what the rest of the day looks like before I can comment. I said, okay, well, when's your next meal? She said, usually between 1 and 2, I have my lunch. We don't have to get into like all the details of like what she's eating, and let's just, because that's a whole different conversation. But she says 1 to 2. I said, okay, and then after that, when do you eat again? I don't really eat again after that. I just kind of snack a little bit when I need it, maybe some cottage cheese or something, maybe some fruit, and then I go to bed by 8. So she goes to bed by 8. She hasn't really had a meal since 2. The next time she's eating is 11 a.m. the next day. Like, that's not intermittent fasting. That's starving, right? That's not what your body needs. Your body needs food and nourishment to function. By the way, so do your sperm and eggs, right? So I had to have this conversation, and she's like, but I don't feel bad when I do this. I feel good. I said, if feeling good is measured on a scale of 0 to 10, and you only know in your world what feeling like 3 to 4 feels like, when you feel like 3, you feel bad, and when you feel like 4, you feel awesome. But if I showed you what it would feel like to feel like an 8 or a 9 or a 10, then like your mind would blow. You'd be like, wow, I didn't even know this was possible. Right. So when I explained when I explained it like that to her, she understood, like, oh, okay, yeah, I feel good, but like, do I really feel good? I don't even know if I really feel good. Right. And I would beg to I would question her. I'm like, I bet you don't really feel good, but you just don't think you feel bad. Right. And that's really where you're at. She also was, putting in a lot of like other drinks throughout the day that kind of gave her some energy. So there's some caffeine, and then there was some mushroom drink, and it gave her, so like she doesn't think that she feels bad, but those are also suppressants for her appetite. So we can't, like, that's like, and if you just think logically and forget anything else I said, if I just told you the schedule of the way she ate, and you were objective with yourself, if you ate similarly to that, you could see, like, yeah, that's not what we were meant to do. Right. So I think we just need to all like think objectively and logically. It's not easy to make change. I don't pretend to think that it's easy. And I don't think anyone listening should make all the changes all at one time. You prioritize different things. Maybe we start with something like to build up momentum that's easier for ourselves. But then we've got to get to the hard stuff, whatever that is for you, and we've got to do it. And I will say, I believe to do many of the hard things, we all need a coach. I'm not saying that because I'm a coach, which I am. I'm saying that because I have always used coaches when I needed to accomplish difficult things. I have a personal trainer. I wanted to start working out again. I knew that I wasn't going to reprioritize it in my life unless I had somebody who was making sure that I did. And I also didn't want to think about all the different things that I needed to do. So I wanted him to create the plan for me. And now I see it. He tells me to work on this day. I do the plan. I go to the gym. I work out, and I feel good. So these are all things that are important and doable. And these are things that, in addition to the reversal itself, are what's going to actually be healing for you and make the progress that you want to see, and typically faster.
Man, what a mic drop there, because I was in that boat where I didn't know how bad I felt until I felt good. And I feel that so much with so many of my clients. Like, you think you're thriving and doing okay, but I promise you, like, if you do these things, you'll feel so much better. And I think that so many times, and maybe it's wrong, but just from my perspective in talking with clients, a lot of times it's like the woman is like researching all the things and wanting this to happen like yesterday. And so she's nagging to exercise, stop drinking alcohol, stop vaping, stop doing all of these things. And I don't know that it's coming across in the sense that you said, where it's like, imagine your kid, like what are you giving to your child, your grandchildren, like what are the gifts you want to offer them health wise. For me personally, like having kids in my 20s when I was very unhealthy and young and stressed and emotionally, physically, all the things not great, but to see the difference at 40 when I had spent like 8 to 10 years prioritizing my own health, to see the difference that my now 4-year-old, the lifestyle that she has, like people always comment on her long, luscious locks. And I'm like, well, she also is a 4-year-old who knows to prioritize protein at every meal. So, like, I would contribute that to her good habits. She takes deep breaths to regulate her emotion that took me 40 years to figure out. And she was doing it at 2. Like, her life is completely dramatically different than my other two, but that was because I had all of these great foundations going into it. And of course, we still were learning and all the things together. But what a gift. And I'm of the opinion that her, like, being able at 2 years old to withstand 50 hours of traveling when we went from Phoenix to Vancouver to Sydney, Australia, and her not have a complete and total meltdown. I attribute that to, like, she doesn't eat sugary snacks. She has good sleep hygiene. Like,
Love
we
it.
were calm and collected. So she was and had a great, and I don't think that that should be like, that should be the norm, not the thing like, how in the world do you do that? Like, we should all have little children that are energetic and adventurous, but not freaking losing their minds every 5 seconds, because they're overstimulated. Like, she's very good on her sleep hygiene. She loves working out. She's would come home before I pulled her out of daycare. She would complain about how their breakfasts weren't healthy because it was just cereal and bananas and that there was no protein at 3. And I'm like, wow, that's, like
You did a good
a
job.
little pat on my own back there, because I was like,
100%.
it took me so long to figure that out. And it's something like, I had a lot of generational things in the way that I grew up in the South, where sweet tea flows like water, that I had to overcome, that she just won't have to, because it's just exercise, being active, riding our bikes, being outside. That's just who we are and what we do. So she doesn't have to unlearn. I'm sure I'll screw up in some way, but it is such a powerful thing to think about the gifts that you're giving in health to your kids. Because I think that we often take health for granted until it's not there. And if you don't have that, like, push where it's like, and our bodies put up with a lot, they're very resilient. But if you don't have that, where you've lost your health, it's like, if you don't have that, what do you have? So I
Yeah.
appreciate that very much, that just that visual picture of like, yeah, okay, maybe your wife's nagging you about stopping drinking alcohol and you don't really want to, because what's the harm in, one or two a day or a weekend or whatever. But like, realistically, like, are you going to look in your child's face and be like, yeah, okay, I gave you my best?
Yeah. I think when it's our partner, by the way, who is telling us that, super easy for us to ignore it. They're always chattering in our ear, like, why am I going to listen about this? Right? Like, they're always saying something. But look, the easiest person for us to ignore are the people that love us the most, because they're always there and you're used to hearing their voice and you think it's just noise and nagging. But they're telling you because they love you, right? Like they're not like these are people we shouldn't be ignoring. We should be listening. But it's so easy for someone, or maybe easier for someone to listen to this podcast and be like, oh, well, Susan and Mark said it. So, you know, I'm gonna change. I listened to this podcast and now I'm gonna make a change for myself. Well, like your wife's been bothering you for 6 months. How do you think that makes her feel when now you're like, oh, I'm going to make this change? On the flip side, I will say to all the wives, all the partners, it's like your partner, your husband needs to come to those terms on their own. And they won't maintain the progress and the changes they need to make without them wanting to make that change. So the biggest gift you can give them is say, listen to this podcast. This is how I feel. As opposed to nagging them or what they perceive to be as nagging, right? And I think that's really valuable. I think that will come across, right? So it's about each one of you kind of meeting each other a little bit more in the middle, one being more open to hearing what your partner has to say, and the other one saying, look, maybe I got to say it a different way, and this is how I'm going to say it, right? So I think that's really important when we're trying to make those changes. If I didn't want to go to the gym, like my wife had been exercising with our neighbor for, a year, and she's like, why don't you come with us? No, I'm okay. Like, I don't, that's not where I want to work out, right? Like I needed to do it for myself, and I needed to tell myself, I think it's time. It's time for me to make this change. So we all have to come to that place on our own, to be able to really make long lasting change, I think.
So good. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to share all of this wisdom. Like I know that obviously this is my wheelhouse in space and I'm super passionate about it, but even just like that reminder of the gifts that we're giving to our future children in taking care of ourselves, like that's been a long mission of mine for moms, especially as I came from the, you know, health and fitness world. Everybody wanted to lose weight. And my thing was change your family legacy. I aspire to be the grandmother that my grandkids go back to my kids and say, man, I was with grandma today and I need a nap. Like she wore me out. Like I have long been thinking about how I'm going to live my life in my 80s and 90s and be very vibrant. And, my husband and I always say, a lot of the guys he works with, he's a firefighter, but a lot of the guys are just like, give in to like, oh, I'm old, I can't do this, I can't do that. And they don't have healthy habits, or they give him a hard time for getting up and working out first thing in the morning. And he's like, well, I plan on living to 100 plus. So like, I got to be doing something now. I mean, he's almost 50. So like, we're just getting started is how we feel. And so I think that that's so powerful. But before we go, is there anything else that you want to tell couples who are in this boat, like they've spent all this time and money and they wanted a baby like yesterday, it's not happening? Is there a message that you have for them?
One is I've seen it all over the last 20, almost 22 years, and I believe that there's really hope for everybody. One way or another, you can have the family of your dreams. Um, but I will say more in a practical, logical sense, while your partner is waiting those 3 to 6 months after the reversal, and they're putting in hopefully the time to make the changes on their end, this is the time for you to take care of yourself as the partner. Don't wait to find out like, okay, they're ready, good to go. We've tried, it didn't work, or we did an IUI and it didn't work, or even worse, we did an IVF and it didn't work. And now I'm going to look at myself. This is the time for you both to do these things together. Improve your family health together as a unit, even though you each might have to do different things. And don't wait to investigate yourself. So much of fertility issues are both a male and a female factor. And so let's just clean everything up while we have this time. Let's use this time proactively so that you can get the results that you want when you're ready to start trying and not have to wait even longer at that point.
Yes. And I'm a big advocate too, even just on because I see, and I think that trying to conceive in any scenario can be stressful if it's taking longer than you want it to. But certainly after you've spent thousands of dollars and gone through a procedure like this, you've had to take time off of work, all of the things that there's so much just stress and like focus on we have to do it at this time on this day. And if we don't, like everything is ruined and we've missed a cycle. And there's just so much stress and pressure that I'm a big advocate of like, have fun, like if, because people will say like, oh, should I use, a cup and get inverted and whatever. And I'm like, if that like gets you excited with your husband and that's not weird, okay. But like if that adds stress to the situation, like don't do it, like if you think it's going to improve your chances, but you're all stressed out about it, it's probably not going to do any help. It's like, but Mary's sister's cousin did it and it worked for her. Like, okay, great, So I'm all about like connecting outside of your fertile window and obviously having a healthy lifestyle and good like relationship foundation because when you have kids, like you're two ships passing in the night and you need a good solid foundation built on good health and sleep and all of those things so that you don't, you want to give your kids the best versions of you. And you can't do that if you don't have a good foundation. So thank you so much for taking the time. I'll make sure everybody knows how to find you because you have such great information out there. I appreciate you so much.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for joining me on Conceiving After Vasectomy Reversal. I hope you're feeling encouraged and more hopeful on your journey to growing your family. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who could use a little extra support. I absolutely love reading your reviews. They mean the world to me. Like seriously, words of affirmation are my love language. So let's stay connected. Find me on Instagram at conceivingaftervr and join our Conceiving After Vasectomy Reversal Facebook community for even more support and encouragement. I believe that God placed the desire for a child on your heart for a reason, and I'm grateful to walk alongside you in this season, to encourage you, and to help you find joy in the journey, trusting that His plan is greater than we could ever imagine.
Thanks for listening.